Hi guys, Tip here. So today we are reading Chapter 12 of Ranger Apprentice by John Flanagan. Holt examined the target Will had been shooting at and nodded. Not bad at all, he said. Your shooting is definitely improving. Will couldn't help grinning. That was high praise indeed from Holt. Holt saw the expression and immediately added, with more practice, a lot more practice, you might even achieve mediocrity. Will wasn't absolutely sure what mediocrity was, but he sensed it wasn't good. The grin faded and Holt dismissed the subject with a wave of his hand. That's enough shooting for now. Let's go, he said, and set off, striding down a narrow path through the forest. Where are we going? Where are we going? Will asked, half running to keep up with the ranger's long strides. Holt looked up to the trees above him. Why does a boy ask so many questions? He asked the trees. Naturally, they didn't answer. They walked for an hour before they came to a small collection of buildings buried deep in the forest. Will was aching to ask more questions, but he learned by now that Holt wasn't going to answer them. So he held his tongue and bided his time. Sooner or later, he knew he'd learn why they'd come here. Holt led the way up to the largest of the ramshackle huts, then stopped, signaling for Will to do likewise. Hello, old Bob, he called. Will heard someone move inside the hut. Then a wrinkled, bent figure appeared in the doorway. His beard was long and matted and a dirty white color. He was almost completely bald, and he moved towards them, grinning and nodded a greeting to Holt. Will caught his breath. Old Bob smelled like a stable, and a none too clean one at that. Morning to see you, Ranger, said old Bob. Who's this? You've rung to see me. He looked keenly at Will. The eyes were bright and very alert, despite his dirty, unkempt appearance. This is Will, my new apprentice, said Holt. Will, this is old Bob. Good morning, sir, said Will politely, and the old man cackled. Called me sir! Hear that? Ranger calls me sir! Make a fine ranger this one, Will. Will smiled at him. Dirty as he might be, there was something likable about old Bob. Perhaps it was the fact that he seemed to be in no way overawed by Holt. Will couldn't remember seeing anyone speaking to the grim-faced ranger in quite this familiar tone before. Holt grunted impatiently. Are they ready? He asked. The old man cackled again and nodded several times. Ready they are indeed, he said. Step this way and you'll see 'em. He led them back. He led them to the back of the hut, where a small padlock was fenced off at the far side. There was a lean-to shed, just a roof and supporting posts, no walls. Old Bob let out a piercing whistle that made Will jump. There they are, see, he said, pointing to the lean-to. Will looked at the small two horses trotting across the yard to greet the old man. As they came closer, Will realized that one was a horse and the other was a pony, but both were small, shaggy animals, not like the fierce, sleek battle horses that Brandon and his knights rode to war. The larger of the two trotted immediately to Holt's side. He patted its neck and handed it an apple from a bin close by the fence. The horse crunched it gratefully. Holt leaned forward and said a few words into his ear. The horse tossed its head and neighed, as if it were sharing some private joke with the ranger. The pony waited for old Bob until he had given it an apple to crunch as well. Then he turned one large, intelligent eye on Will. This one's called Tug, said the old man. He looks about your side, don't he? He passed the rope bridle to Will, who took it and looked into the horse's eyes. He was a shaggy little beast. His legs were short but sturdy. His body was barrel-shaped. His mane and tail were ragged and unbrushed. All in all, as horses went, he wasn't a very impressive sight, thought Will. He'd always dreamt of a horse he would ride one day into battle. In those dreams, the horse was tall and majestic, and it was fierce and jet black, combed and brushed until it shone like black armor. This horse almost seemed to sense what he was thinking and butted his head gently against his butted its head gently against his shoulder. I may not be very big, his eyes seemed to say, but I just might well surprise you. Well, said Holt, what do you think of him? He was he was fondling the other horse's soft nose. They were obviously old friends. Will hesitated, not sure to offend anyone. He's sort of small, he said finally. And so are you, Holt pointed out. Will couldn't think of an answer to that, and old Bob wheezed with laughter. He ain't no bow horse, are he, boy? He asked. Well, no, he isn't, Will said awkwardly. He liked Bob, and he felt any criticism of the pony might be taken personally. But old Bob simply laughed again. But he'll run any of those fine, fancy-looking battle horses into the ground, he said proudly. He's a strong on this one. He'll keep going all day long after those fancy horses have laid down and died. Will looked at the shaggy little animal doubtfully. I'm sure he will, he said politely, Will leaned against the padlock fence. Why, don't you see, he suggested. You're fast on your feet. Turn him loose and see if you can capture him again. Will sensed the challenge in the ranger's voice. He dropped the horse, as if realizing that this was some sort of test, skipped lightly away into the center of the small enclosure. Will ducked under the fence rails and walked softly towards the pony. He held out his hand invitingly. Come on, boy, he said. Stand still there. He reached out his hand for the bridle, and the little horse suddenly wheeled away. It shielded to one side, then the other, then stepped neatly around Will and danced backwards out of reach. He tried again, and again the horse evaded him easily. Will was beginning to feel foolish. He advanced on the horse and it backed away, moving closer and closer to one of the corners. Then, just when Will thought he had it, it nimbly danced to one side and was away again. Will lost his temper now and ran after it. The horse whined in amusement and romped easily out of reach. It was enjoying this game, and so it went. Will would approach the horse, and the horse would duck and dodge and escape. Even in the close confinements of the small padlock, he couldn't catch it. He stopped. He was conscious of the fact that Holt was watching him carefully. He thought for a moment or two. There must be a way to do it. He'd never catch a horse as light on his feet, as fast-moving as this one. There must be another way. His gaze fell on a bin of apples outside the fence. Quickly, he ducked under the rail and seized an apple. Then he went back to the padlock and stood stock still, holding the apple out. Come on, boy, he said. Tug's ears shot up. He liked apples, he thought. He also thought he liked this boy. He played this game well. Tossing his head approvingly, he trotted forward and took the apple decidedly. Will seized hold of the bridle, and the pony crunched the apple. If the horse couldn't be said to look blissful, this one did. If a horse could be said to look blissful, this one did. Will looked up and saw Holt nodding approvingly. Well thought out, said the ranger. Old Bob elbowed the cloaked man in the ribs. Clever boy, that he called. Clever and polite. That un will make a good team with Tug, won't he? Will patted the shaggy neck and the pricked up ears. He looked up at the old man. Why do you call him Tug? He asked. Instantly, Will's arm was nearly torn from its socket as the pony jerked its head back. Will staggered, then regained his balance. Old Bob's braying laughter rang out around the clearing. See if you can guess, he said delightedly. His laughter was infectious, and Will couldn't help smiling himself. Will glanced up at the sun, which was fast disappearing beyond the trees that fragile old Bob's clearing and the mill beyond. Take him over to the lean-to, and Bob can show you how to groom him and look after his tack, he said, then added to the old man, we'll stay with you tonight, Bob, if that isn't unconventional. The old horse handler nodded his head in pleasure. I'll be glad of the company, Ranger. Sometimes I spend so much time with this horse that I start to think I'm one myself. Unconsciously, he dipped a hand into an apple barrel and selected one, absolutely crunching into it, much as Hug had done a few minutes earlier. Holt watched him, one eyebrow raised. We might just We might be just in time, he observed dryly. Then tomorrow we'll see if Will can ride Tug as well as he can catch him, he said, guessing. As he said it, that his apprentice would get very little sleep that night. He was right. Old Bob's tiny cabin had only 2 rooms, so after their supper, Holt stretched out on the floor by the fireplace and Holt bedded down in the warm, clean straw of the barn, listening to the gentle, whiffing sounds of the 2 horses. The moon rose and fell as he lay wide awake, wondering and worrying over the next day might bring. Would he be able to ride Tug? He'd never ridden a horse. Would he fall off the minute he tried? Would he be hurt? Worse still, would he embarrass himself? He liked old Bob, and he didn't want to look foolish in front of him. Nor in front of Holt, he realized. With a little surprise, he was still wondering when Holt's good opinion had come to mean so much to him when he finally fell asleep. Well, guys, that's chapter 12 of Ranger's Apprentice. Like and subscribe if you want more. Bye, guys. Tip out.